All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Business Strategy Roundtable. Today, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence's role in improving decision making. We were going to have Kurt Pichler join us today, but he let me know late last night that he was going to be unavailable. And luckily, I'm blessed with great friends that are willing to jump in. And John, who's been on the show a couple of times, is joining us today to be our resident AI expert, and we're going to tackle the conversation about how artificial intelligence can really get in to improve the speed of decision making and the accuracy of decision making for businesses, individuals, governments, or whatever the hell else. So, first of all, thanks for being here, John. I sent you a message probably at 9 o'clock Eastern last night, and you got back to me really quick saying you were excited to do it, which happened one time before. It means a lot. How are you?
Oh, I like to say mixed as usual. Bring out a radar plot of here's all the dimensions of my life and their score, and the average is 7.3.
Spoken like a true data scientist. Man. What's tell me some of the highlights. What's something exciting that's going on right now out there in Salt Lake City?
What's interesting, I guess, a little bit is Salt Lake City is they're preparing, like most of the nation, for the holiday rush, and that kind of includes
Friday, huh?
Yeah, that kind of includes, a mix of shifting business priorities and forestalling business priorities and increasing other priorities. So if you're in commercial sales, this for many, this is where you make the bulk of your revenue. And yet, if you're in the need to hire somebody, this is often the time that you take a break from your normal activities. And so, so business, across the nation changes. Now, we've just started getting a little bit of snow in the mountains.
Spending changes too, right? Because you're starting to consider end of year reporting and how you're going to look at the end of quarter four, and it's a larger, it's a tax, your taxes are starting to come up. So businesses definitely behave differently in quarter four.
Yeah, they get it. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why kind of the market's influenced by the end of October is there's that shift during the holiday season or the tax end season where they're just focusing on other things that have to get done, and then they pick it back up in January. So I've had a number of clients that have just said, "Oh, I'm just looking at things for planning, and we're going to start in January." And then I have other clients that are like, "This is an emergency because, I need my e-commerce website to work for the season."
Yeah, that's right. Let me ask you this about the internet and Black Friday, and I guess the value of things, right? Because Black Friday is supposed to be a big value day, and I've seen on memes and on the TikTok, which how reliable is that? Uh, Different things showing not real sales, advertising or marketing as though there's some big sale happening, and kind of preying on the fact that people are more open to spending. Uh, what with a Black Friday or with the holiday? It's not Black Friday, is it? Have I got this confused?
Well, right. Black Friday would have been
After.
for the brick and mortar businesses.
Right.
Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, Friday,
Yeah,
the day after Thanksgiving. And what they're key on off of is an old, 10, 15 years old, an old social norm where everybody has the Friday after Thanksgiving off work.
Yeah.
So what else are they going to do? They're going to shift gears from Thanksgiving holiday to what I call Giftmas holiday. And I get hit by my wife when I call it Giftmas in front of her out of disrespect. But I look at it, what are people celebrating? They're celebrating gifts, giving and receiving. So it's Giftmas. Anyway, from a brick and mortar standpoint, if you're going to have a sale that attracts people and you're competing for attracting people, doing it as a singleton event on Friday like that is your best chance. Now, businesses have changed with the internet, and so I don't think Black Friday means what it used to mean, because it can start the week before, it can go on for 2 weeks.
Especially online.
Special, and you can have it now. There's no rush to wait in line and to rush the doors, and there's not necessarily the scarcity thinking of I have to hurry and get where they run out. And so, the modern environment now kind of dispels or reduces the impact of what a brick and mortar Black Friday would have been. And you can go to Walmart and do their Black Friday, but you can also do it on their website.
Yeah.
Ahead of time and just go pick it up, and then you're not in the crowds, and you're not there's no riot, there's no stampede, there's no riot. And so but in general, the pressure is still there from the bigger picture of if you're selling commodities and you're into that segment where people would spend their budgeted holiday spending on you, and you're competing for that. You're still in that competition, but you're going to if you're selling through e-commerce, your tactics have to change. You may still leverage Black Friday to a point, but you're still going to have social media tactics and other tactics to get people through that e-commerce door, if you will.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for thank you for being here. We're going to still be able to cover the same topics that we intended to cover in the first place. So today we're going to be talking about bias in decision making, data overwhelm, and how it affects modern day businesses, and how you can utilize AI to impact that. Consensus decision making, and how to make decisions when you don't actually have a consensus at the table. So in many businesses, you may be making decisions that impact a large number of different groups of people, or different demographics, and you won't always have everybody at the table. And considering how AI can be used to improve that is fantastic. And then finally, we'll touch base a little bit on the future of decision making as it relates to the impact of AI, and how that's going to change for businesses and individuals. John, before we dive into bias in decision making and how AI can impact that, would you mind giving everybody a little bit of a quick tour over your background, so everybody has a clear understanding of your expertise as it relates to data science and AI and what you've kind of
Sure.
done? Thank you.
As a starving student, I worked as a programmer as I was working on towards a mathematics degree. And by the time I was done, I was making 3 times as much as a programmer than I would as a mathematician. And so,
how did you do that while you were going to school?
Yeah, so I was going to school part-time for a mathematics
Part-time
degree. I didn't do the student loan. They didn't really have them that much at the time.
Smart.
Well, and I wouldn't recommend doing a student loan now. There's so many people. Yeah, there's so many people that because they have a student loan, they can't buy a house. Because they have a student loan, they can't start a new business. They can't get a business loan. And it's kind of terrible. I think the educational system has failed students. We can talk about that as a different topic. Anyway, so I started as a programmer, but I have this mathematical background where I'm just thinking about things.
When did that start for you? When did you get into math? Because I remember when I was young, being very interested in it. When did you realize that it was like something that you were kind of into?
So, probably the beginning of junior high, so 7th grade.
Okay.
And I had tested above my grade level, so they went ahead and put me a year ahead in math.
Had you always kind of been better at math than other folks?
Yeah, if the tests were better, they probably would have put me on the autistic spectrum.
Okay.
But who knows? It was kind of funny. I mean, I have a memory of the bullies coming up to me as a group, and they're gonna bully me, and then one in the group is like, "Oh no, he's really cool. He'll help you out in math." So they left me alone. My math saved me from being bullied in junior high.
Was that when you were so was that around the time where you said 7th grade, you tested above average, and then they put you in an advanced class? Was that around the same time that you had that type of experience?
Yeah, and what was really interesting about this grade ahead is the cohorts, the other 7th graders at the time. Year by year, we were all in the same class together. So we had a social structure, very supportive. Cliques. The cheerleaders and the football players were one clique, and that wasn't me. I was the nerdy part that played Dungeons and Dragons, and we were a clique. And
I'm still trying to get somebody to teach me how to play that, by the way. So we'll have to talk about that too. Okay, so that was you had those groups. Keep going, which might be good for this conversation.
Well,
because there are groups.
So we were used to studying. We were used to studying and learning math together. And in my senior year, where we were doing calculus, they actually gave us a washed-up teacher.
What's a washed-up teacher?
He was demoralized. He didn't want to teach anymore. He was just going through the motions, getting to his retirement. And because we were this odd group of 30 kids that really wanted to learn math, we didn't care about the teacher's problems. And he had said, "Oh, I haven't reviewed the next chapter, so we're just going to do the previous chapter." And everybody in the class said, "No, we can do this." And we picked the smartest guy. Go give us a review. And then we went through the problems as if he were teaching it. And it's embarrassing.
What's that guy doing now? Not the teacher. He's probably not doing well.
No.
What's the guy that you guys made teach the class?
Yeah. His name was Doug. Well, so the teacher, it kind of shocked him, and he actually went to the university and enrolled in a refresher course so that he could get ahead of us. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the year, he took us all out to breakfast and gave us little fake awards. But he almost cried.
You gave him a little bit of, you reinvigorated him.
We restored his faith in that some students actually want to learn things. Anyway, let me skip to the middle. I helped start up a
smart, because if I'll keep asking questions and we'll stay in high school
I
all
know
the way to the end of the hour.
I helped start up at the time we just called it an expert system. It was based on machine learning, which we would call AI today. The term AI to me is constantly changing. It's AI is whatever humans are surprised that computers can now do. So as soon as we're bored of large language model, we'll call it something else, and AI will be the next thing we're surprised computers can do. And I do believe at some point we will get bored of the new shiny, we're so surprised at how eloquent AI can be. We'll get bored of that. We'll understand it. We'll take it into our toolkit, just like we do calculators and spreadsheets today. And there will be a new thing called AI, which we can be afraid of. There's always the apocalyptic thinkers that see the end of the world in something, and we're going to call that AI. And we're not going to call large language models AI anymore. We're going to call it probably large language models. And we'll have a better understanding of what that is. Right now, we're in a nascent form where it means you say AI and you don't know what the other person interprets it by. Anyway, what we were doing is we were doing an automotive repair system, and we would digest the automotive repair manuals from the manufacturers and classify them. And we would have and it's no different from what we have today. We would have a confidence on each result. Large language models have a confidence. The kind of the difference is that the latest ChatGPT has trillions of these decision points, and where at the time our AI model, our machine learning model, had hundreds or thousands. Anyway, so we would train on the automotive manuals and then present that to the repair technician.
So when I'm imagining the difference between trillions of decision points and hundreds or thousands of decision points, and I'm imagining, and like if at any point I say something silly or dumb that needs corrected or some extra color, just interrupt me. But I'm imagining looking at like a HubSpot decision tree or automation tree, where you have, this came in, and if this, then this, then. When you're saying that there are trillions of decision points, is it to that granular? Like what constitutes a decision point, and what's the difference between, thousands and trillions? Obviously, the ability to compute and the way that all those decisions are being registered. But talk a little bit more about that for me, because I'm just lost there.
This is where I think it's important to understand that often our technologies are more craft than they are science. And so we will hire a data scientist, but what we are actually hiring is the person's ability to craft an AI model, not necessarily. So when we say the word science, often we think they fully understand what's going on. And in the case of a data scientist, they do not necessarily understand what the computer is doing, but they understand the recipe that they can use to give the computer for it then to produce the model that they then on the other side use to taste the cake. So you have a recipe that the data scientist would use to quote unquote bake the cake. And then you have the taste testing on the other end of how does this cake taste. So what these decision points come into how the data scientist has crafted the AI model. And in automotive repair, what we did was, what kind of information is this? Is it a theory of operations? Is it a diagram and schematic? Is it a technical bulletin, and so on? So each of those would go into a decision point of how do you catalog this data. In the case of modern ChatGPT, what they're doing is they are taking an intense level of word order. So they will, in essence, digest the internet as the data sample, and they will pay particular attention to what's the first word of the sentence, what's the second word of the sentence. Given this as the first word, what is the most likely second word? Given these two as the first and second word, what is the most likely third word? And so on. And so they go into minute detail of word order, grammatical classification of the word, and so on. And they build a network of trillions of these associations. They train the model against those trillions of decision points. And then you as a consumer taste the cake, if you will. You as a consumer pose the question. AI spews out given this question, here's the first word we would use, here's the second word we would use, here's the third word. And it puts all that together, and out comes this output.
So what is what would be an example of some of the decision points in the automotive manufacturing? I'm blanking on the not AI word for AI, computer.
Yeah, so the machine learning.
Machine learning, right. So what would be an example of one of those data points?
Okay, so what we would do in the expert system, and you can see this in the medical world as well. So in our case, we would scrape the repair ticket. We would notice there's a strange noise, and so we would take there's a strange noise symptom. And find all of the pages in the automotive manual that address strange noise.
Okay.
Now, we can add a decision point of the location of the strange noise. We can add a decision point for the year and make and model of the vehicle. We can add a decision point for the season of the year. And so all these things enrich the model, if you will, so that the repair technician had the same surprising thing. The repair technicians overwhelmingly said that our system knew more than the manufacturers knew, which was impossible because we only use the manufacturer's data, right?
Yeah.
But the point, and I think it applies to our discussion today, the point was it wasn't that we knew more than the manufacturer knew. We knew more relevant. We knew the relevant information that so the manufacturer would say, here's all the information in this stack of manuals. And given it makes a noise over the left passenger side, over the left wheel, during the winter.
Yeah.
Well, this is the 3 pages of the manual you should probably pay attention to. Oh my gosh, you know more than the automotive does. And the same thing's happening with AI, given caveats that I hope we get into on the complexity and what I might call gaps in the model. So again, you can go to ChatGPT. Well, in fact, let's do an in-between one. So IBM does Watson, and they deploy it, which is essentially a large language model, but it's geared towards domains. And so they will do a medical-only domain of artificial intelligence, and then they'll sell that to hospitals. And they don't do a trillions of decision points like the ChatGTP does. They could,
Right.
I guess it gets down to another part of this is your data scientist can craft a model and it can be junk at the other end. And typically what they do is they scrap that model and they craft a new one. Now, if the cake at the end is good, they may work to tweak and improve their model, but they still have to test. They still have to test at the end of how good they're getting. And it's I think it's a similar notion as your audience uses AI to improve their decision making. They have to understand that what they're getting might not be the quality that they need. So they review. It's important to review the answer for quality and consistency, and sometimes appropriateness. I've had AI models that for whatever reason, they give me the opposite of what I was asking for. And if I hadn't caught it, it would be like, oh, that would be bad because this is the negative of what I was trying to address. And so part of what the consumer of AI should always do is they should always prove and to me, the right metaphor is AI is the intern. AI is the one that gets the draft for you together. Go get these books, the librarian, go get these references and bring them all before me and summarize them. So they've done that additional draft for you, which saves a lot of time. So often the large language models can be a workforce multiplier because they can give you correct grammar, they can give you flowery language, they can give you all these kinds of things, and yet it's incumbent on the consumer to proofread to make sure that
that's what I'm trying to say.
That it's meeting the exact mark, it's meeting the audience, it's meeting the intended purpose, and I think in our preparation for today, one of the things that I wanted to convey was. Start with ChatGPT today if you're just getting into it, or Hugging Face, or any number of Llama is Meta's Facebook's version. Start with those today to kind of get a feel for it. But most of the businesses that I've talked to that use AI, they eventually build their own model. So they eventually use the data set that's most pertinent to them, build their own model, and then they migrate to that. And part of that is gap. That way they can fill in gaps in the domain at the expense of having other gaps. So, maybe you've trained it for a hospitality sector to build itineraries for your consumers.
I don't know shit about cars.
And you don't want it to know anything about cars.
Yeah.
Where if you do
ChatGPT, because then you're efficient.
Where if you're in a big tech model, it knows about cars and it knows about hospitality and it knows about medical at a certain level, maybe not the way you need it, and then it can pollute your decision making because
with other data points.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're getting car decision.
You're looking at page 304, in the manual that doesn't have anything to do with what you're actually measuring against.
Right. So what questions? I've only added questions, not removed them.
So I have something I want to. Yeah, you're right. You're right. We are having a very wonderful conversation to be had. One thing I want to touch on before I start pelting you with more and more questions, which may make more and more questions, but that's okay. This is a long conversation to be had. The one thing that I want to point out is you talked about the idea that people would say, well, it knows more than the manufacturer. And I want to add color to that from my perspective, from my operations perspective, as opposed from the data science perspective. So I come from the corporate world, which isn't my favorite thing to say, but it did teach me a lot about how business works and how business at a very, very large level works and how, like, kind of your point, and similar with artificial intelligence, there are gaps where things just kind of don't work when you get to a certain size, because you can't have the efficiency and the micro to cover everything perfectly. Um, now, in this instance, where we're talking about people suggesting that the AI knows more than the manufacturer on whole, well, it's kind of true, but it's kind of not true. And it's not true in the way that you said, well, they're the one that put the manual together and we're utilizing the data. The manufacturer, as a manufacturer, knows exactly as much as the artificial intelligence does. But the manufacturer is a combination of every person and every piece of equipment uh, that is making the operating manufacturer be able to continue. So somebody or some group of somebodies compiled the manual. Many groups of somebodies determined what the information is to be able to make the vehicles in the first place. There isn't one guy in Ford running around that's like, this is how you do it with everything. Now, maybe there is, but likely there's not. And if there is, he's very highly paid. So the AI doesn't necessarily know more than the manufacturer, but the AI knows more than every individual piece of the manufacturer, because the AI is able to consider the total that was given to it from everything that had ever come from the manufacturer as a whole, which we deal with individuals. I'm talking to you and your knowledge, you're talking to me and my knowledge, but the AI is able to take everything that was considered in an equation by all of the smart people that have put the information together, and then deduce possibilities or answers from that. So I wanted to just draw that as a really more of a visual, or just kind of make the point, because I think the idea that a business or an individual in the business is going to be able to hold all that information. Nobody expects that from people. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it, or I can just throw the next question to you.
No, well, kind of two thoughts. And one is we're dealing with, in essence, scales of infinity, right? That one person has, they have a certain set of knowledge. I almost called it discrete.
We'll do it. Let's do it. What's the difference between discrete and infinite knowledge?
Well, discrete implies that there are gaps in the knowledge.
Which all you would have discrete.
Right, and you would expect that with all humans.
Right.
You should also expect that with all artificial intelligence, because it's, as you point out, that the models, the current AI models, are all built from humans that are all discrete.
Right.
So we can't expect infinite or omnipotent behavior from artificial intelligence, even though that's part of what the new shiny is. So when you first interact with artificial intelligence, it's amazing how eloquent it is. And just like the repair technicians were amazed at how pertinent the information that came forward with, and they would compare that to, I've got the 3 foot of automotive manuals on my desk, and I couldn't find this information. And so there's a leverage there that shows the advantage of artificial intelligence. And yet, if you go too far and expect the artificial intelligence to be omnipotent, right, you're not doing yourself a service. You have to recognize it's discrete information.
You're trading away your agency. If you don't consider where you have information, or if you don't consider the discreteness of the situation, then you're anytime you turn your brain off and don't consider what's happening around you, it's wrong. You ever see the movie Click?
Mm-mm.
Really, with Adam Sandler and the
I'll have to
remote?
add that to. I'll add it to my list.
Well, anyway, I'll make this really fast. He has a remote and he like he can control what's happening around him in his life, and he wants to skip forward to the parts that are going to be good, and they never come because he's never in the moment to make the things happen. So I've spoiled it for you, but that's okay.
No, that's fine. I don't mind spoilers.
So
your audience is mad at you, but
my audience is mad at me. Hilarious. Everybody's dying to see Click for the first time. So that's kind of how I feel about taking AI's information without actually like considering the output with your own through your own lens.
Well, and we've talked about this before that if you do not want to be a mathematician, it's great to use a calculator and a spreadsheet because it does all that math for you. Great. I don't want to be a mathematician. If you do want to be a mathematician and you only use a calculator and spreadsheet, you're unable to learn math. And so part of the use of AI is, like you're saying, is don't put yourself in the recessive role. Don't put yourself in the receiving only role. Continue to hone your expertise, continue to hone your capabilities in whatever you're doing, so that so that you're still back in charge, so that you're still back kind of doing the overview, because AI is not going to do an overview of are you on the right track. It is subservient. Yeah, it is subservient.
You're the one to point it.
Right. It's answering your question in a pattern matching way as best it knows how, which may be average information. And yet you as an individual should be working to hone your skill and improve the expertise. And at some point in time, to me, this is a gauge of how well you're doing, is if half of the answers AI tells you, you have to jump in and say, oh, that's wrong, or this isn't said right. Well, then you are a practitioner of what you're trying to get AI to do. You're winning. Yeah. Does that make sense? So it doesn't mean
you're not getting everybody else's output, because if you don't put your man, I was watching a streamer play some video game the other day, and he is at this level and had been at higher levels before, and he made this statement that I thought was really profound. I actually wrote it down. He said, if you play how your teammates who are not the skill level you want you to play, then you are in the right place. You are that level. But if you're able to lead, and if you know this is what we should be doing, this is where this should be going, this is what the actual output should be, then you're growing and you're going up. But as soon as you think, well, this has it more than me, and you said it great. Your words were fantastic. You said, don't put yourself in the recessive role. Don't put yourself in the subservient role. Go, engage with what's going on around you.
Well, right. And then part of is, your warning is at the start of this, be aware. Don't be blindsided. Rephrasing that a little bit. Don't be blindsided. That, recognize that you as the individual have the responsibility to deliver or protect or analyze and own that responsibility. So sure, use AI to help you, but don't use AI as a crutch. Use it as kind of that intern, right. The paralegal, right? Use it as the paralegal that goes and collects a bunch of stuff so that you don't have to, but recognize that you're still bringing whatever your craft is to the table.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's talk about, so we've got 20 minutes here to hit some of these high level things that I promised people that we would hit. So bias in decision making as it relates to AI. I know that we've kind of talked around different points related to this, but
well, and so in part, this may be why you have to migrate to, as you mature in your use of artificial intelligence, you may have to migrate from the big tech AI to private AI of your own generation. I mean, it could still be open source, but you've just moved. An example would be Mozilla is making great headway in speech recognition over the other big tech. You'd almost call Mozilla a big tech, but they're committed to maintaining an open source model, a free software model.
shout out Mozilla.
Yeah, and
Did they make
so
a Razor? No, that was Motorola. Never mind.
that was Motorola. They make Firefox, the browser,
Okay.
and some other things. So what Mozilla is doing is they people that participate willingly produce audio samples and transcribe them, and they feed that into the Mozilla speech recognition model. And because one of the advantages that they have because of the way they're doing it is they get low quality sound, right? Sound in poor environments, poor windy environments. So they actually have more realistic data that they're training their model on.
They got my goofy ass out there on the phone in the wind, and they're still able to pick up the audio because they've got so many more data.
That's the samples that they're collecting, where big tech is collecting pristine samples for audio. And so they, when you give it a poor sample, big tech's unable to transcribe it correctly. Anyway, so part of my point is I'm not including Mozilla in the big tech, and you can shift if your solution is transcribing audio. Well, Mozilla might be a better point, right? Or if your solution is transcribing audio, and there are private companies that have done this. An example would be you can see your doctors today will transcribe their meetings with you. Well, that is all private AI. That's not big tech AI, in part because of privacy concerns, but in part because the vocabulary is not in big AI enough, right? And so in essence, they've reduced the data sample to medical jargon. They then bring the humans in for the low confidence words, which then get corrected and transcribed. That's added to their model, so it improves over time. Big tech does the improvement over time as well.
Yeah.
Which in big tech's case has the effect of making it more average instead of more elite.
Yeah, because they're too outlier-y, so it just
right. And the big tech example is that they first trained their model on New York Times writers and classical literature, and wow, give me a poem and it sounds like Shakespeare. Give me an article and it sounds like it could be published in the New York Times. And then over time, as they've incorporated average people's things, it doesn't sound like Shakespeare anymore. It doesn't. It's not ready to be published in the New York Times. And again, so this is part of that transition. Is get used to using AI, but recognize at some point you may need to move to a reduced model that's more specific to the domain,
right?
So that you can get above average results. That's kind of the point that I'm making.
Can I throw something out there?
Yeah.
So this I think is a good point to draw the distinction between large language models and I don't know what they're technically called, like niche or specific or tactical models. I don't know what the hell you want to call them, but specifically focused models. Could you give us just an idea of what a large language model is? I think you'll be able to do it quickly based on what we've already talked about. And then,
Yeah.
Maybe how you'd find them, because I think that's kind of interesting also.
Yeah. So what? Yeah. What? Uh,
Encircle.
Expert systems generated from research way back in the early '90s, where the university researcher at the time said, "Why don't we model things after nature?" I guess a case in point is at the time they were trying to get computers to understand language by by categorizing all the parts of speech. So they had a huge database. They wanted to understand language by putting everything in a database, and they were completely failing. And so the university professor said, "Okay, well, let's do it differently. Let's understand things like nature does with biology, with hierarchy of probability inputs." And so that science started, and they started labeling the recipe, if you would, that the data scientists would create to create the model that then had the output. So LLM is the name, large language model, is the name of a specific recipe used by data scientists to generate a model. And this is, we talked about it a little bit before. It's the, when you're answering this question, what's the first most common word? Given the first most common word, what's the second most common word, and so on.
Trillions of decision points.
Right, and they do that trillions of level of complexity, and first order decisions, second order decisions, third order, and so on. Well, so that that recipe, if you will, is called LLM, large language model, and so then we've extracted that out in the vernacular to just be we just swap that out for AI, not realizing the specific for it.
I know I'm asking a question while you're answering a question that I've asked and that you haven't finished, but what's the difference between a large language model and a long language model? Because I've heard it said both ways, and I'm assuming they're just the same thing, but is there a difference?
There probably is a difference. I'd have to look it up specifically, because now you're getting into what the particular reference recipe is. So, there's an Nmap recipe. There's, at some point, if it's clever enough, they'll name it after a person instead of naming it after a description. Large language model is a description. Long language model would be a description. And there would be some intricacy in why the recipe is different. And then you throw tons of data at it, you get a model, and then you test it out to see if the model achieves the objectives you were trying to achieve.
So then what are the other, so we talked along large language model. What do they call the other ones? Or has it not?
Yeah, so that would be our Google search, right?
I guess you couldn't chat GPT it.
You probably could. Should I try that?
I'll try it on my side.
Well, yeah, if you go to Hugging Face, you'll see all kinds of AI models that they have on sale and for use.
Are they selling them now over there? They figured out how to sell them?
They do sell them. Models. I don't know that.
Lightweight,
Systran, AlphaFold.
Lightweight language models. So they're just trying to figure out how to keep LLM for all of it. We got long language models, we got large language models, we got lightweight language models. We're just trying to fuck everybody up. Nobody knows.
And that's probably a reaction to LLM taking a super role instead of a precise definition role. And so now, I was thinking of Llama was Meta's version, and there's LLMs in there. They threw a little lowercase l.
All right, let me ask you this: what's data overwhelm? So if I'm a business owner, I am a business owner, I'm overwhelmed by data. What the hell does that mean?
Well, I think there's two forms of this. Is statistically, most people, say 90% of people, they become uncomfortable when they have more than three choices.
No shit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now,
Is that why I never know what I want to eat? Or do
it
I
could
have
be.
other, or is it that spectrum thing you were talking about?
Well, if you're on the spectrum, like me, more choices is awesome because you dive in and I'll make a spreadsheet on the different changes and put a score together
Me and
and
my
then
best
sort
friend, when I was
and then
when we were little, we would write 20. We would do a bracket, and we would do heads or tails on a bracket of like
yeah.
20 different places that we could go. You know, his mom would be like, "All right, boys, we're getting ready to go to dinner. Like, what do you guys want to? Where do you guys want to go?" And then me and him, who were really good friends for probably the same reasons you and I are really good friends, we freaking broke out that shiny quarter and started flipping it.
Well, and then psychologically wise, what's happening is there comes a fear that you're going to make the wrong choice. Where the 10% of the people that, great, bring it on, 20 choices, kick out those. But there's also a part of that 10% are not necessarily on the spectrum. They just don't care if they make the wrong choice from the standpoint of, if I make the wrong choice, I make the wrong choice. I'm not going to fear it. And so there's no aversion to making the wrong choice. They still approach it. I made the best choice I could at the time. I don't care if it was wrong in hindsight. So the 90% of the people, there's those two factors of, I don't know how to make the right choice because there's too many decisions. I might make the wrong choice. And now I have to put all this effort into analyzing the more than three decisions. That's a lot of work. I'm stressed for a lot of work. So from a consumer side of things, if you're a business owner giving people choices, you can take that into advisement. And this may be common knowledge. I've just heard it. It kind of hits me as often you want to give the choice as a business owner. The choice you want them to decide is the middle one. So you give the low the choice to get them in the door. You give them the high choice to say that everything's wonderful, and then you give them the middle choice, which is the one they want to pick and the one you want to deliver, and you've kind of tuned everything around that. So you've reduced it to three choices, and you've led them to what you want to sell. Now, as the business owner, if you're running a business and AI gives you 20 choices, you kind of have to roll up your sleeves and either model Zach and I with your spreadsheet, or model what do you want to call them? The big boy pants of, I'm making the best decision I can, and if it's wrong, I'll pivot, right? I'll make a different choice next time. But right now, I'm going to do this. And I wrote this in my notes for this meeting. There is a book called The Lean Startup, and I apologize to the author for not. But his point is, go ahead and approach everything scientifically. Don't think that you have this meeting, you have the smartest people in the room, you make a decision. Don't assume that you're done. What you should, from a scientific standpoint, you should always come out with a measure of how we're going to make this decision, and in 2 weeks, in 2 days, in some time period, we should be able to observe that we have made the right decision, because this will be the outcome, right? So that when you make a decision, if you pair it with an outcome, you've mitigated whether you've made the right decision or the wrong decision, because you have an evidence of whether you've made the right one. And if you've made the wrong one, you've mitigated the length of time of your suffering the wrong one, because you have that measure, and that measure tells you you've made the wrong decision. Go back and make a new pivot. Take the information you now have and make the decision. So that's a business practice that we should, as humans, incorporate into our lives and our actions and our business decisions. And AI isn't helping us do that.
No, because it considers all the options, so it doesn't solve that for somebody.
Well, right. It considers all the options and then brings forward the ones that match the pattern that it expects you to want to receive.
Right.
So depending on how you ask the question, and I guess that's another point that you should make. At some point, we should talk about gaming AI. Yeah. The way you ask the question, if you're only asking it for one answer, you're only going to get one answer. Yeah. If you ask it for a multitude of answers, you'll get a multitude. So what is the way to do this? You get one answer. What are several ways to do this? You'll get 3 answers. What are all the ways to do this? You'll get 100 answers.
What's the right way to do this? What's the efficient way to do this?
Yeah. See, if you say right way, you're back to one answer, and who's right?
Well, right. Exactly.
Whatever I was trained on.
That's my point, though, because people talk like that. I want to get this right. What's the right way to do this? Well, what is right?
So the next pertinent discussion then would be how to game AI.
Well, thank God we'll cut this up and we'll go through this. We have other ones on the calendar already. Stuff that we've got to talk about. People
we can pivot and prioritize what is the most pertinent for the time.
I want to talk about that hallucination stuff just because it pisses me off so much.
But is that the right thing to talk about?
Well, I guess I've made my decision, and if I'm wrong, I will quickly pivot.
Right.
Let's see if we have time for one more little one here. So I know. Do you have a hard stop here? I want to be respectful.
I do not have a hard stop, so I'm fine.
We'll maybe go a couple minutes over, but I want to touch on consensus decision making, because the conversation here today was intended to be focused on how you could use AI to improve your decision making within your business. Considering bias, considering the right way to be asking questions, considering having the right data, considering using the right tools, I think are all things that we've kind of uncovered as it relates to that. But consensus decision making is really the point I was most excited about touching on, because artificial intelligence is taking the perspective of lots of different people, lots of trillions of different data points, right? But when we're business operators, we are approaching our business from the perspective of ourselves and what we have on our team, which may or may not include a high level of diversity. It may include a high level of diversity because you're a large team, but it may not simply because you're an organization with 7 people. So tell me a little bit about consensus decision making and how artificial intelligence can be used, whether it be through small language models or lightweight language models, or even just more efficient practices in communication with your team. But I'd just love to get a little bit of thoughts from you around AI and consensus decision making.
Well, I guess a couple thoughts. First, put AI in the subservient role, not the decision-making role. And we've talked about that. Next is, there's this old school thought of consider the source, right? Yeah. And so depending on the decision you're trying to make, are the right people in the room? I mean, that's kind of a question you need to ask. Do you really want, how to phrase this without offending people?
Welcome to my life.
Do you really want the autistic data scientist?
You offended us.
Right. Do you really want the autistic data scientist to determine how clean the bathrooms should be?
Well, hold on. I'm lost, because do we like them clean or not?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They may not be the relevant expert, right?
Yeah.
Do you want the autistic data scientist to pick the cleaning solution? So they pick the cheapest one, but it may not be effective. right?
It's true.
Right. I mean, they just pick some measure of, well, the cheapest one's the best.
Or whatever. Yeah.
And so why not bring in an expert in cleaning and building maintenance to help guide? And that's not necessarily AI. It could be, right? It could be AI, but it's not necessarily. And so again, it gets back to your thing. And I think one of the lean startup advices is really don't expect everybody in the room making the decision to be the smartest. And so if you have that in the back of your mind, if you have measures of success in the back of your mind, I think you'll be able to evolve more correctly. You won't think it as, this is a make it or break it decision necessarily. And you can evolve and pivot as needed, but you also will step back in order to not be blindsided and have some consideration into how can we objectively measure whether we're on the right track or not, which you should always be doing. You should always be doing that consistently.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question directly or not.
No, well, it did, and I'm going to add some color to it as well. I think that's a really good point. If you want to have good consensus decision making, make a point to get the people that you're making decisions as it relates to in the room. Now, if you can't do that because there are prohibitive factors like cost or time or whatever else. Oh, my cat. Oh, my goodness. Well, that is the first time that the cat has ever laid on the keyboard in the middle of.
There you go.
So she almost restarted us. Thanks, Bean. So if there's prohibitive factors as to getting other people into the room to be able to have consensus decision making, then the future, and this kind of leads into our last point, and somehow we were able to wrap it all in. The future of AI and decision making looks like having more tactical and specific tools so that you can make more accurate and quick decisions, considering the types of individuals or the types of problems or situations that you're specifically solving for. So if you are making decisions, I don't know if I said this either at the beginning of this call or before we dove into this call. So if I'm repeating something and people are hearing something a second time, I apologize. But if you're making decisions for mothers in northeastern United States, then you should be taking data and putting it into whatever size language model you've got the amount of data for, related to the decision making and the needs, wants, and desires of mothers in northeastern United States. And then you should be considering that as your tool to make sure that you've thought of that important piece of consensus that needs to be considered. So, are we going to always be able to have every perspective at the table for decision making in business? Not always, but I think we're moving into a really interesting space here with the types of tools that we have available to be able to effectively consider these types of things. And I hope that in the future, organizations like yours and like mine and like Kurt's are able to support businesses, individuals, and also government in being able to make better decisions because they're able to consider more wholly the equation.
No, yeah, I think that's really the point, that as you move away from the new shiny of here's how amazing ChatGPT is in the large language model, to using it as a tool, and as a tool to use it in a crafted way with oversight. I do your use of AI will mature, and in that maturity, you'll find points where you will move into what's currently being called private AI. Even if it's open source, even if it's modeled after a big tech model, and it will do just like what you're talking about. It will take the domain of what you're trying to address into account, instead of just doing worldwide data points.
All right. Well, we hit the topics. What I'd like to do now is wrap up your personal story and tell us about what you're working on now. We went beginning, middle, and now ends with a little bit of what's in Circle Marketplace. What do you do if somebody wanted help or support from you, or wanted to work with you in some way, or just wanted to whatever? Tell folks a little bit about what you're doing and how they could get a hold of you and all that good stuff.
So in Circle Marketplace we're kind of a security marketplace, a wholesaler, if you will, for domain experts, virtual CISOs, insurance brokers, virus scanners, AI penetration testers. So just kind of identity services where, if you need to quickly determine that somebody is who they say they are, and they send you a picture of their driver's license and it does all the background checks, or it says, here's 3 addresses that they may recognize. These 2 are false. This one's correct. So those kinds of questions that you can do to address identity, those are people in that service providers, IT service providers, managed service providers can utilize to their benefit in their providing services to their clients. So that's essentially what Circle Marketplace does. And you can reach out to me through the info@encirclemarketplace.com or jro@encirclemarketplace.com and start up a dialogue.
Cool beans. All right. Well, thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. Next week, we're going to be having a really interesting conversation. I've got 2 of my friends, one Melanie and one Susan, who are both professionals in the cannabis industry. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation to take a look into what the end of cannabis prohibition looks like. I know 100 years ago, I would have loved to have interviewed a future head of Anheuser-Busch. So I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with these 2 ladies and getting their perspectives on what it's like to be leading the way in a really ever-changing and complicated space, just like tech. So that's going to be a fun conversation. Looking forward to learning from those ladies. John, thank you so much for stepping up and being a great friend and leader in the space and being here to keep the show going and share some wonderful information. And looking forward to having you on in a few weeks to dive into what hallucinations and AI actually are, because it just gets my goat. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
See you later.